As I speak these words, the Federal Communications Commission is about to hold a hearing in Chicago on an issue that I've been working on for years. And I had hoped that the FCC would choose me to be a panelist and give a full 5-minute presentation at this hearing. Then I found out that the chances that a grassroots media activist getting chosen for a presentation at an official FCC hearing are practically zero. But rather than be depressed by that fact, I've chosen to do something about that fact. I've written up what I would have said before the commission had I got chosen to speak at the commission's hearing on the issue at hand, that of media ownership and its concentration in the United States. And I think it would go something like this. May I have 5 minutes on the clock, please? Thank you. My name is Mitchell Szczepańczyk, and the main topic of this hearing is an issue I've been working on for the past 5 years. The issue is the FCC's controversial media ownership rule changes and its impact on Chicago's media. Should the FCC change America's ownership rules to make it possible for fewer companies to own yet more media properties? There are those who say yes, who not so coincidentally would profit from increased concentration. And there are those who say no, which includes everyone else and far outnumbers those who stand to profit. The FCC, ostensibly the public's guardian to enforce the public interest in media, seems more interested in serving the media than in serving the public. Indeed, those who serve at the FCC often leave the FCC to take on high-paying jobs in the very media they supposedly regulate. Worse, concerning media ownership, the FCC in 2006 has been caught suppressing its own research, which said that concentrated media ownership harms the public. How is the public harmed by increasingly concentrated media? Let me count the ways. I often list 5 common consequences that extrapolate widely. 1. More commercialism in media. 2. Less localism in media. 3. Less quality journalism. 4. Less independent music. And 5. Fewer diverse perspectives. In particular to Chicago, I would like to share some brief specific stories I've collected over the years that provide additional reasons for public harm. Story number 1. Chicago radio personality Rick Kempfer wrote a novel entitled Severance, which was a novel about media concentration. In a radio interview I had with Rick remarked that those who work in the radio industry do not have many options for radio jobs in Chicago, since fewer companies have come to own the stations which offer paid jobs. Story number 2. A community group named FUFA, Females United for Action, campaigned against the Chicago radio station La Ley over the station's sexist billboards. The campaign found out that La Ley was less responsive to Chicago listeners since the station was owned by a company based in Miami, leading FUFA to question why a Chicago radio station shouldn't be owned by someone actually in Chicago. Story number 3. Chicago Media Action, a group I'm involved with, has been working on media concentration since 2002. One thing that CMA has done to raise the issue of media concentration among members of the public was to inform the public and spread the word as a tactic to oppose media concentration. And overwhelmingly, CMA has had to use media outside of the major corporate media apparatus in Chicago simply because those very media have a vested interest in what we're working against. So what should the FCC do? I would offer the following policy recommendations. For one, leave the media ownership rules alone, or better yet, change the rules to reduce the number of outlets that a single company can own rather than increase them. Moreover, the FCC should more precisely define what it means to serve the public interest. After all, everything the FCC does serves the public, but there's no specific definition for what that actually means. And attempts to try to put that into tangible policy get strangled in the cradle by incumbent broadcasters and their fanged lobbies. I think that a tangible definition of the public interest is one good short-term goal. I can offer my suggestions for a definition, and I encourage others to offer theirs. At this point in the conversation, some cynics, both in high-ranking management within the corporate media itself, and even within oppositional movements, would respond back and say, "So what? Even if you halt these media monopolies from growing, even if you enforce antitrust provisions and break up these media monopolies, all you've done is temporarily reversed an outcome which could at some point in the future become undone when these companies eventually later remerge. Just because you break up these companies, you still nonetheless leave behind the larger context involving markets and the profit motive." And I think that's correct. And the conversation is supposed to cease at that point because, to borrow Margaret Thatcher's infamous phrase, "Tina, there is no alternative." To which I respond, Tina is bunk. There have been lots of proposals suggested for a better political economy. I even took part in a debate in February here in Chicago, which debated different models for a political economy beyond the oscillations of corporate monopolies and those more open markets which nonetheless eventually tend to reconsolidate. But to continue discussions along this path would veer us away from the topic of media, and with little time to pursue it. In the meantime, let me suggest 2 books in this vein: Babylon and Beyond by Derek Wall, and Economic Justice and Democracy by Robin Hanel. I conclude by saying, don't think for a minute that activism leads nowhere. Activism is the reason this hearing is even happening, and it's the only thing that ever made a difference in this world. I thank you for your time and attention.